Hello! In today's video, I am going to be showing you how to use the Sketchbook for Procreate set, which is a Procreate brush set that I have created in collaboration with Addie from Uproot Brushes. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up a basic sketchbook page and some tips to help make your workflow as smooth as possible. Let's get into it. This brush pack comes with 3 different brush sets included, and so the first one is the sketchbook set. This will have everything you need to build the actual sketchbook, the bindings, the pages, and then all of the accessories and extras. So there's a photo editing section, some scrapbook and office supplies, stickers, post-its, tags, as well as some scribbling brushes, so a pencil, a couple ballpoint pens, and a felt tip marker. And then there is a paper texture set. This has 17 different paper textures, which are made up of 2 different brushes to create one texture. You can use these in a couple different ways, and we will jump into that in a little bit. But the important thing to note is that the previews for these brushes are going to be solid, but when you actually just use the brushes, you will see the texture come through right away. So if you aren't sure which texture you want to use, just test it. You can always undo, but it's a good thing to note. And then the third brush set is a washi tape set. This has 21 different patterns. They're all seamless patterns. And then each pattern of washi tape has 2 different edge finishes. This one is the scalloped edges. They're meant to be like cut. And then it also has a torn edge version with these nice randomized torn edges every time. So that's what is included in the brushes of the set. There are also PDF guides. We included 6 PDF tutorials. Also included in the set is a reference file that you can explore the layers on. It includes a fully set up notebook page with art. And it's set up with Page Assist for turnable pages, so you can use one document as a functional sketchbook. Okay, I'm going to start with a new document. So in my gallery, I'm tapping this plus sign and then this smaller icon here to create a brand new canvas. And I'm going to make this pretty large. I'm setting it at 5,000 by 4,000 pixels. Definitely adjust this according to your iPad capabilities. I have only 29 available layers at this size. That's plenty for what I'm working on, but if you have a different iPad, your sizing may vary. So just keep that in mind as you go. This is larger than I typically work in. The reason for that is that we will have space outside the bounds of the notebook, and then our actual working area will be a bit smaller. So to keep a high resolution for our sketchbook page, it helps to have a larger overall area. Now, to get started on building our actual sketchbook, I'm going to start on the base layer and I'm going to use one of the page brushes. For this, I'm going to use the A4 page. And I'm grabbing pure white and I'm working on my very bottom layer. Because this canvas is so big, I have to set the size a little larger. You might have to stamp a few times and redo and adjust the size as you go to figure out what size will work best for your project. All right, I'm going to move this over to the right side of my page. And then grabbing the transform tool set to freeform, I am just going to drag on this side node to adjust the width a bit. And then I'm going to release that selection. And now I am going to duplicate this layer by sliding to the left, tapping duplicate. And on my second layer, I'm going to tap the transform tool once more. And this time I'm going to turn on snapping and magnetics. I do have a video on snapping and magnetics in Procreate if you want to check that out for more details, but essentially this will allow us to move our object along while keeping it exactly aligned as it is, which is perfect because to create that 2-page notebook spread, we want them to be exactly aligned. So you can see the guidelines pop up as I drag it and it snaps into place nicely. Now, without touching anything else, I'm going to tap on the bottom bar, flip horizontal, and this will give me a mirror image of my first page. As far as the distance between them, I am leaving that where it is right now, and we can adjust that when we put down our binding. So now moving up to my second layer here, I'm going to grab this orangish gold color, and in my brush panel at the very top here, I'm going to select one of these center spiral bindings. I'm going to grab the single wire one. And now you can kind of see why I was waiting to adjust the distance between these two, because depending on the size of the spiral, the gap in between them will change. So I'm going to increase the size of the spiral just a little bit to about 20%. This looks a little big, so I'm going to decrease the size just a smidge to 19 and see how that looks. And I think that this looks pretty good. I'm keeping my pencil touched to the screen until I get this message up here that says line created. And I'm going to release, and then on this notification here, I'm going to tap edit shape. Now what this gives me is a handy movable line, so I can use these little nodes to adjust. And what I like to do is I like to zoom in on the top or the bottom separately and align them to one of the page edges. You can see there's this really faint line here that's meant to be a guide so that you can align things perfectly. To ensure that you're moving just one end of the line, it's important to just drag the blue node directly. And if you want to move the entire spiral all at once, then you can tap outside of those nodes, whether it's on the line or outside of the line itself. And this will function kind of similar to how to move an object with the regular transform tool. So here I try to eyeball it to make sure that the spiral is mostly centered between the top and the bottom of the page. Whatever tool I tap next will lock this in. So once I have it set to go, I'm gonna go back into my layers panel. You can see that interface goes away. Now on my second page layer, I'm going to tap the transform tool again. And before I move it, I'm gonna zoom in. I still have snapping and magnetics turned on, so I know I can move this and keep it perfectly aligned horizontally. And I'm going to just bring it up till it is flush against the guideline. Then I'm going to tap the transform tool to release it. Now, before we go any further, I am going to pinch to merge my two page layers together so they are combined into one, and we can move on to the next step. All right, now I am in my layers menu. Then I'm going to move up to my third layer and add some shadows to the edges of our notebook to make it look like they are stacked pages. So for this, I'm going to grab solid black, and there are several options. There's multi-page edges as well as single page edges. I'm going to grab the 3-page edge. Starting from the bottom, I'm going to keep my pencil touching to the screen as I draw a line until it snaps into a line. Then I'm going to tap edit shape at the top here. So I like to have it flush with the top edge, and then if we move down to the bottom, I like to keep a small gap here, and we will connect the bottom edge of the pages with this multi-page edger brush. So I'm releasing that, and then I'm going to grab the narrow shadow edge. And starting from the center, I'm just going to draw a line until it snaps into a straight line. Once that's done, I'm going to tap edit shape. And in the center of the notebook, I'm going to have this pretty much touching the corner on this side. And then you can see it tapers upwards towards the edge here. Sometimes you might get a little bit of a schmutz here on the corner. I like to use the soft blend from the airbrushing panel for that perfect smooth blur, and you can just kind of blend that shadow up and out a little bit. Then I'm going to repeat that, and this time I'm just going to align it to this second page here. And of course, it doesn't extend all the way. We'll draw that in manually. But first, I'm going to make sure that my center point here is aligned with the page as well. I'm going to release that. These brushes are pressure sensitive for opacity, so you can use less pressure and have it taper off, which is what I like to do for these small bits that we're adding here. And I like to keep it until it snaps into a straight line, and then tap edit shape so that I can make sure that it is perfectly aligned with the multi-page edge brush. It's very subtle, but what I just want is to add a little more dark shadow here on the corner of the page. And once more, just blur a little bit of that shadow out with the smudge tool. And then as our last one here, hold until it snaps to a straight line, and then tap edit shape. Set the center point. I used less pressure here so that the opacity tapers off towards the center and then gets darker towards the outside corner of the page. And then I'm going to just eyeball approximately where that would end. Then I'm going to draw a subtle shadow to connect the two. Now, if you'd like, you can also add a shadow on the inner edge of the page under the spiral. I'm decreasing the opacity of my brush here to about 60%, and then I'm just going to draw a straight line, tapping Edit Shape, and then I'm going to reposition these nodes. Now, this isn't a crucial step by any means, but I do think it helps give it a more tangible feel, again, just adding to the realism. I drew all of my shadows on a layer above the spiral binding, but since this crosses over the actual binding part, I'm going to switch the layer order of these two layers. So now you can't see that overlap, it's nicely tucked behind. Then I'm going to duplicate my shadow layer, and with the transform tool, I'm going to tap flip horizontal, and then I still have snapping and magnetics turned on so that I can keep this perfectly aligned. And we're going to move it across our page to the other side. Then I'm zooming in so that I can get this perfectly aligned. And then I'm going to just tap to nudge it into place. Then I'm going to release the selection, and we have multiple pages on both sides. Then I can merge my two shadow layers here. I'm going to do some quick layer organization for you. All right, so now we can add our paper textures. Because we want the texture to just live in this page area, what I'm going to do is grab the selection tool, and then I'm tapping automatic, and I'm going to tap to select just this inside page area. You can see the selection threshold comes up, so you can adjust by sliding to make sure that you have just the page and not the shadows selected. And then I'm going to tap once more to select the left side page. And then with the selection live, I'm going to go into the layers panel and move up to a new layer above the notebook base. We're going to grab white. And in the paper textures section, we are going to select a paper texture. For this, I think I will use the crushed paper, starting with the linear burn option. These brushes, you'll see they have set size points that are saved, and this will help you as you layer both of the brushes on top of each other, keep the texture of the paper perfectly aligned. So these control the scale of the grain texture, and by using the two, we're creating a perfectly aligned overlay that passes through and pushes the shadows and highlights through the page to your art. That sounds a little complicated, but all you really have to know is that you'll want to keep these two size points the same between the two brushes. So this one is on the largest size point, and if I were to keep this on the smaller one, you can kind of see the paper texture just does not align. This scale is smaller. But if I set it on the larger one and brush this over, still using white, it's going to be the exact same. So I'm going to tap on the layer to bring out the blend modes, and then on this one I'm going to select overlay. This is my uppermost layer, and then on this second one I'm going to select linear burn. And then if I hide this, you can just see that it really enhances the texture underneath. So I had mentioned that there were a couple different ways to use this. Now, this is the, I would say, default one. This is where you're going to have the most depth of texture because you have both the linear burn pushing the shadows down through, and then the overlay adding that highlight on top and enhancing the shadows further. You can see it layers over your art and beautifully transfers that texture through. Alternatively, you can just choose to use only the linear burn layer. Pop in some art here so you can see the full effect. So this is with just the linear burn brush set to linear burn, and that's without anything at all. And then if I add the overlay, it becomes a really rich, deep texture, which might not be the effect that you are going for. So what you can do is, I always recommend playing around with different blend modes. I really like, instead of setting it to overlay, setting it to soft light as an option. This is like a less intense version of overlay. You can also play with the layer opacity. That's another way to really fine-tune the amount of texture that passes through. So those are some options. You can also mix and match. So if you want to add one brush with the linear burn and then use a different texture, I can show you what that might look like. If we grab the overlay version of the Sketchbook brush. I'm setting the blend mode to overlay right away. And then I'm going to reload my selection by tapping and holding on the selection icon. So then, of course, if the textures are different, you don't have to worry about the size settings being any different. So that's what this looks like with two different paper textures applied. The crumpled paper I used the linear burn brush on a layer set to linear burn, and then for the overlay layer, I used the dollar store sketchbook overlay brush with the blend mode set to overlay. One last thing, something that I like to do for these more crumpled, textured, rich papers is use Liquify to kind of adjust and move some of the edges of the pages around. But I want it to all look cohesive, so to do that, I'm going to make sure that I select every layer that I'm going to be affecting. So I'm selecting both my paper texture layers, my shadow edges, and my page base. So with all of these selected, I'm going to tap the wand here to get to the adjustments menu, and then I'm going to tap Liquify. Now I have it set to push. I have the size set to about 30, and I have momentum turned to none, and then pressure, set it to 50. And so what this means is that it will treat it as less liquid than if you had the momentum turned all the way up. Okay, we're going to reduce the brush size. It's way too big. So what I'm doing here is following some of the shadows of the paper texture and then nudging the edges just the slightest amount. The goal is not for this to be an overt change, but instead to kind of boost the overall realism. And I think that just like the tiniest amount makes a pretty big difference with this. So one thing I like to do is push on like the topmost shadow edge and then pull back, or you can use the reconstruct setting to kind of fix some of the lower edges so that they're not all quite so crumpled. And now I didn't demonstrate this here, but you could even go into the paper texture layers and lightly erase the crumpled texture from these lower pages, should you so wish, since realistically they wouldn't be crumpled the exact same uninterrupted way as the top pages. The last step here is to remove the paper texture from the binding. So if I zoom in, you can see that overlap causes some different color variation. You can very much see the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to mask that out on both of our texture layers. So I'm using 2 fingers to press and hold on the spiral binding layer to select that. That'll select just the layer contents. And then on my texture layers, the first one, I'm going to tap to bring up the side menu, and then I'm tapping mask. And now this is masking out only the spiral, so we're going to tap once more on this layer mask, and I'm going to tap invert, and that brings back our texture. I keep my selection live, and I'm going to tap on my upper texture layer and mask that as well. And once more, I'm going to invert it. You can see it bounces back there. Alternatively, you can drag the spiral binding layer above the paper texture layers, and this will visually accomplish the same thing. So now you'll just want to keep your texture layers up at the top. I like to create a group so that I don't accidentally click on them. You can even lock it so that you know you won't draw on them. And then you can also group your lower elements as well, and then add all of your painting and sketching layers in between. And that is how you build a notebook spread in Procreate using the Sketchbook brush set. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to use Page Assist versus Animation Assist to create a multi-page flippable sketchbook you can easily navigate through and then export as a PDF should you so wish. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you aren't already. Thank you so much for watching. If you make something with this set, I would love to see, tag me. I'm at Willy Pronto on all platforms, and tag Abby at Abby_uproot as well. We always love seeing the beautiful things that you create. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.